So Shelly would come home from work after a long day, and she had just picked up her two kids. One was 3 years old and the other one was only 8 months old. And she'd get home and her husband had gotten there a couple hours earlier. He was enjoying a beer and watching TV. And Shelly would feel irritated because she'd hear the TV and she'd see him relaxing again. And she started thinking of all the things she had to do starting with dinner. And this pattern had gone on for the last couple of years, and she was feeling herself pull away, feeling bitter, feeling lonely, and the result was they were growing farther apart. And it was just a rinse and repeat. So what can we learn from this? Well, today we're going to talk about patterns. Last week we talked about seasons in our life. And understanding seasons and patterns is huge and really, really important. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. When I talk about patterns, specifically, we're talking about our relationship dances that we have. So I'm focusing on relationships, but it can work with anything, like our friendships, our work relationships. It also can be relevant to the patterns we have with ourselves. And I might touch base on that a little bit later. So our brain loves patterns. That's just the way it is. Just accept it because it gets comfortable, and patterns is just a way for it to know what to do. It helps it to not have to program and put so much effort in, so it conserves energy. So our brain loves patterns and will try to keep the patterns because it doesn't care about our growth. It just cares about conserving energy and keeping us alive. So we have to remember that patterns are going to be a very common thing, and it's just how our brain works. So that's the first thing, is just know we all have them. And then when we're in a relationship pattern that isn't serving us and we're feeling yucky about it, the first thing is to recognize the pattern. And that's huge, because the thing about patterns is they kind of can be like merry-go-rounds or like the hamster wheel. We just kind of get on them and rinse and repeat and keep going. And we don't even realize, and then years go by. And then we're wondering, like, why don't I even like this person? Things like that. And so it's really important to understand that we all have patterns going on, whether we recognize them or not. So understanding our patterns and how they relate to different relationships in our life is huge. Our patterns with our loved one, our patterns with maybe our parents, our patterns with our friends. Like, we could have a pattern with our parents where, we try to tell them something, but they always say, oh, you're going to be okay, it's all good. Or, maybe a pattern with our parents where we tell them something and they want to give us advice all the time, and that, aggravates us. So there's always patterns going on, but it's great to recognize, oh, when this happens, then this happens, this is how I feel, and this is what goes on, and we just rinse and repeat. And that's a pattern. So recognize the patterns and really understanding, like, this isn't working for me, I don't really like this, is huge. Tony Robbins talks about, if you guys haven't heard of Tony Robbins, I suggest looking him up. I was telling my kids about Tony Robbins, and they're like, who's Tony Robbins? Well, most of them said that. And he's really one of the greatest self-development people, and he's been around for a long time in this space. But he really talks about how recognizing patterns in economics and business is huge and key to thriving, and even with self-development, recognizing patterns. So again, pattern recognition can play a really key role in our lives. So recognize patterns. And then the second one is watching for the repeating patterns from childhood. Because the wild thing is if we have unsolved things in our brain from childhood, or if we have comfortable patterns from childhood, we will naturally repeat them. Unless we've done the work and healed those wounds and intentionally decided to change those things, we will naturally go to those patterns. And that's the wild thing, is because we will literally draw somebody just like our parents, as far as a partner. And we're like, how did we do that? I didn't even want that. It's because it's a comfortable pattern, the dynamics. And it's like, oh, I know this feels good. And so it's just good to know, like, what are our patterns that we were raised with in childhood, and to kind of flesh those out, because again, all things can be redeemed. And I tell my kids, I'm like, your childhood is like a bunch of marbles, and some of those marbles are really sucky, and you just have to like understand them and then realize that you're not going to repeat them. But if you don't study the marble, that's where you're going to run into problems. And if you don't make peace with the marble, even the marble you don't like, then that's where it's going to cause problems. And so got to know our marbles and understand like all the good things from childhood, or even like things that may be neutral, but there's still patterns within us. And I laugh because we really do have a love blueprint where like, and they're all different, but that's patterns we developed within childhood. And so the love blueprint for one person could be, oh, the loving thing is for a man to provide for his wife and for the wife to stay home, and that, and we make this pattern and she does all the work and this and that. And that's love. So she could have that blueprint, and he could have a blueprint that's like, oh, our blueprint, my blueprint is, we work together and da 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 da. And if we're not working together, then that doesn't work. And so they're coming with two blueprints and two patterns. And so really understanding those are patterns, those are blueprints, and deciding intentionally what we want our patterns to be. Because if we don't decide intentionally, we just fall into the same old patterns from our past. Pretty amazing. And that's, again, just our brain's way of conserving energy and being comfortable. I'm offering some free pages of the Unravel Notebook to help support you along the journey and to correlate with this week's episode. So look for the link and enjoy. So again, we have to recognize the pattern and then watch for the repeating patterns from childhood or from our past. And so seeing like for example, a gal would always choose, client would always choose men that were unavailable. And that was a pattern for her. And then she went back to her past and realized that her dad left her, and she just decided that men were unreliable. And so she just chose men that couldn't be very reliable because they lived thousands of miles away and could never live in the same place. So it's interesting how our brains work. It's pretty tremendous. So I didn't realize recently that I was wired for a pattern to be around depressed people. And it was my job and my pattern to elevate them. So I regularly align myself to compensate in my closest relationships and to be the needed one. And then my husband, Mike, he was wired to thrive in chaos. And be regimented. And that's, his pattern is like thriving in chaos. So military school for him, when he went into the military and the Navy when he was young, was easy peasy for him because he had a pattern of chaos and regiment. And so he also went into hurricane work as far as helping with restoration and helping with the testing after restoration to help the restoration companies. So he typically would thrive in chaos and the hurricane crisis and working through it with themselves. And that pattern was what he developed. And so we developed this relationship pattern where he was comfortable in like the chaos of his own stuff. And I was in my repeat pattern of elevating him. And basically what happened is it was just making me freaking tired, especially after my niece had passed away and my energy was a lot lower. And so that pattern was not working for us anymore. And it first started with identifying, oh, this is the pattern, and identifying, oh, where have I seen this pattern before? And so I kept going, where have I seen this pattern before? And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like rinse, and repeat all the way back, to my childhood. And so it's really good to be able to be like, oh yeah, we need to kind of do some work there in order to do some work here. And that's what we're going to talk about this week, is doing the work, in our past to help us and support us in our present. So really though, to understand our patterns and stuff like that is a good way to check with our bodies and our minds. So our bodies will tell us if something's not working for us. In fact, it tells me way better than my mind will. My mind will justify about anything and say, oh, it's okay because da 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 da, or it will have an excuse for about everything. But my body will be very, very much tell me. So if my body and your body will work the same way. If you're not breathing all the way, like with a full belly breath in and, just breathing, and you find yourself constricted, that's telling you something is off. And so those might be part of repeat patterns or just something's not aligned. So you can really tell, or if your chest feels heavy, or another one is like, especially for women, we tend to feel things in our neck and our shoulders and get a heaviness and a weight and pain and migraines from there. If you're getting those physical symptoms, that's just your body's way of saying, hey, there's something off, and it's likely a pattern that doesn't work for you. And so really check in with your body, and then also with your mind. You can check in, with, and your mind and body go together, but you can check in with like resentment, or bitterness or anger, repeat anger. Like anger is beautiful at telling us things. And that's why it's important to allow anger in our lives. And if there's regular anger, then that's telling us there's something wrong. And there's probably a pattern that's not working for us. So those are the first three things. So in order to understand what our body and mind are doing, you can definitely use the barf notebook process. You can get that on my website at livebrighter.info. And again, that is a way to kind of barf out our emotions uncensored in a safe place, and then sort it out and plan it out. Because really, like, the more we like barf it out, barf it out, barf it out, and just uncensored, the more we can really see patterns. And so that's super helpful, and especially if we make that a pattern. Like, I would absolutely encourage everyone to do the barf notebook process daily. It's a great way to understand ourselves, to see those patterns, to regulate. It's a wonderful process. So barf it out, sort it out, plan it out. And even with that unravel notebook and that barf plan, the last tool or the last thing is to plan it out. And I would say when we're doing the planning it out, the first thing to ask ourselves is, okay, how do I need to support myself? Or what do I need to go back and heal? What's on my side of the street first? And then what actions do I need to take? Because then we can be like, okay, do I need to set a boundary? Do I need to address this? What does that look like? So really we can change the dance, but we got to change by changing ourselves first, changing our dance steps first. And then we can work to create a dance that benefits both of us. And it's important to know that it does need to benefit both of us, because it's really important to know that you are made in God's image. You're unique. You're made with your own ways. And so is whoever you're with. And it really doesn't honor God if you're the one suffering all the time and not working together to really encourage and build each other up. If it's not a give and take, that is not how relationships work well. And so it's really important to make room and know that you need to, if this isn't working for you, then that's important. And one of Mike's and I's relationship rules, if it's not working for the other person, then it's not working for us as a team. And that's a really important belief system to have in a relationship, is that if you have a problem, then we have a problem. And that's very, very important. So again, knowing what to do to change the dance, and that's the fourth step. So we talked about recognizing the pattern, number 1. 2, watching for repeat patterns from childhood. 3, make sure we're checking into our mind and body to understand what it's telling us as far as what patterns aren't working for us. And 4th, plan it out and figure out how to support ourselves, and then what actions we need to take. Today, I'm going to focus on this last little exercise to kind of support us in number 1, number 2, and number 3. And we won't work about the planning it out till next week when we talk about how to develop a relationship guidelines and how to shift the relationship guidelines. Because whether you like it or not, you have a relationship guideline with whoever you're with. And it includes your patterns in that guideline. And so we're going to talk next week about what guideline do you want and what you guys can agree to together. And that makes it a lot easier. But today we're going to talk about how we can support our younger version of us that is also playing a part in the pattern development. So if you're able and safe to close your eyes, then do it. If you have a piece of paper by you, then definitely grab it so you can jot this down, because I'm going to ask you a question and you really need to put down the first thing that comes to your mind. So let's get started. I want you to just start by just taking a deep breath in, and I want you to breathe out slowly. And take a deep breath in and breathe out slowly. And if you need to close your eyes during this time, then do it. But I want you to just ask yourself, what is the pattern in your life right now that doesn't feel good? And I want you to jot down or think about the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay, and if you have the time right now, then you can continue to do this exercise. If not, come back to it. So now that you've identified it, I want you to just ask yourself, just go inside and turn your eyes inward and just ask yourself, first of all, identify what is the pattern. This happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. So that's the pattern. Then ask yourself, where has this happened before? You know, how long has this happened with whoever, whatever's going on? Where has this happened before? And identify that. And then I want you to do that again. Where has this pattern happened even before that? And I want you to just keep doing it until you can get to your earliest memory of this pattern. And then I want you to just think about what that younger version of you was experiencing that started the creation of this pattern. Who was there? What was going on? What were you feeling, thinking, and experiencing that made you come up with the idea that this pattern needed to come into existence? Now, I want you to just go to that younger version, the earliest version you can remember that had this pattern. I want you to give your younger version what it needed at the time, but it wasn't getting. It could be safety, it could be a hug, it could be some encouraging words. So just take a moment and give your younger version what you needed at that time and you weren't getting. Really good. Now I just want you to take a deep breath in, and I want you to take a breath out. So I would encourage you to just do this until you can really get some clarity on when this pattern started and really support that younger version, because once you break that off, then it's a lot easier to deal with the here and now and the pattern that's going on now. And we're going to talk more about how we do that. We deal with the here and now patterns in those relationships next week. So make it a great day. I believe in you. We're all growing 1% at a time. Talk to you later. Thanks for joining me as we discuss patterns, which is the second part of a 3-part trilogy we've been doing. The first one was on seasons, and you just listened to patterns, and then we have the lucky privilege of listening to Susan Scott talk about fierce conversations and fierce love, and then we'll have the third part of our trilogy, which very much pertains to Susan's conversation about how do we change those patterns within our relationship. I'll see you there.